Okay, in this video I'm going to show you my top 20 images from 2020. Hey everybody, it's Jay here. Welcome to my channel. Welcome back to my channel, hopefully for many of you. 2020 was a pretty lousy year for most of us, us included. It was definitely challenging. Photographically, however, I did get a chance to get out and do a fair amount of shooting, mostly around the New York area where I live, but I did some traveling as well, not too much. What I want to do today is show you the best 20 images of 2020. Initially, I was going to do the top 10 photos, but I have trouble editing my work, like many photographers. And so I chose the top 20. There's a nice ring to it, top 20 and 20. And so for each of them, I'll give you a quick description. I won't go on too long, otherwise the video will just be too long. But I'll give you some of the background of them. So the first image I want to show you is one that actually I took in 2019, late in the year, but I didn't get it on my computer to 2020. So I figured I would include it. And I happened to be in Hawaii. I've had the wonderful chance to go to Hawaii over the past number of years, late in the year. This is a photo of Caitlyn Conrad. She's a professional ballerina. She's graceful, she's beautiful. What I tried to do here was to capture her along with the beauty of the Hawaiian shoreline. I wanted to get that rushing water, so I had about a third of a second exposure. She had to stand very still. I had a off-camera flash, which helped freeze her a little bit. But I just love the softness of these colors, and of course she's just a spectacular model. Anytime I get a chance to shoot with Caitlyn, I do. That same trip, in fact I think it might have been the next day or two, first of the year, I went down to the shoreline in Kona. This is the big island of Hawaii, and I planned to get really close to the shoreline, use a wide-angle lens. But the surf was incredibly rough that day. These waves were enormous. Here's a quick video of a guy who almost got blasted by a wave. So I ended up standing further back, had my long lens, and I just had to time it. When I had that, a great wave coming in, or a set of waves, I was shooting, and I lucked out here because the sun was hitting the waves while the sky in the back was kind of dark. And so it made this cool image with nice contrast. Later in the year, we actually did go visit our son who's going to school in Southern California, and we spent this is before COVID, by the way, we spent 5 days in Palm Springs, and we really tried to embrace the architecture there, mid-century modern architecture. We did a lot of tours, saw a lot of homes, and I got this shot with a fantastic car parked in front. I just love the way the tail fins of the car mimic the roofline of the house. The colors were great. This was one of my favorite of that trip. While we were in Palm Springs, one morning I woke up, kind of got out of bed, looked at the bed, and this was the scene that I saw. I just love the kind of the story that it told with this unmade bed, with the brightness outside, and those two flip-flops right in front of the window. This was a pretty cool shot. Black and white as well, really highlights the shadows, highlights the shapes. So around here, we don't get too many foggy days, but when we do, I try to grab my camera, go out and take some shots. So this spring, we had 2 foggy days in a row. And I went out, the first shot that you see is from Rockland County, New York. It's a pier that I've shot before. But with the fog, it really creates a nice minimalist feel to it. And I purposely included those branches at the top of the frame. Normally I don't like things invading my frame that way, but in this case I like the contrast between the organic, almost gnarly nature of those branches and leaves, along with the kind of the straight lines of the dock. The next day I drove to the Jersey Shore, and I got this shot of a very long fishing pier going off into the fog. That's the Raritan Bay there. So during the year, we actually moved. We sold our house of over 20 years, and we're in a rental while we're building a new house, but the rental has a pretty good basement. And so I set up a makeshift studio in the basement, and I did a portrait session with my son, Andy, who was a willing model and a very handsome model to boot. And so I was messing around with lighting and backdrops, but I got this great shot of Andy, which I think does him justice. A little later in the year, I took my camera and an off-camera flash into New York City and took this picture of Paige Nelson. She's a real estate broker in the city, and found this great urban backdrop. She happens to take amazing pictures. She's beautiful, obviously, but when that wind came by and just pushed her hair off her face a little bit like that, we thought that was just the perfect shot. At least I did. So I did have one sort of photo trip. It was actually a commissioned trip to Montana, mostly in Glacier National Park. I'm not going to show you those pictures because those belong to my client, but while I was driving around out there, in fact en route to a sunrise shot, I drove by this gas station, and I just love the simplicity, the black backdrop that I was able to get at a very early hour. And then later during the week, I was driving around, big sky country as they call it, and it is exactly that. But I saw this great barn being lit by the sun with a dark sky in the background. I thought the colors were great. I love the contrast, and so I jumped out of my car and snapped some images. The fall foliage this year around here in the Northeast was actually pretty good, and I went out a bunch of times. This shot I took on my weekend birthday trip, and my wife set up for me. Of course, I took my camera, and so, but I just love the layers of the different colors of leaves and how the fence and the trees act like leading lines. So this was the best foliage shot that I got. I was pretty happy with it. I did make a purchase this year. I bought a macro lens, figured it was about time. There was one on sale. I got the Nikon 105 f2.8 macro, or they call it a micro lens. So I borrowed a watch from a good friend of ours and took some shots with it. This was my idea of kind of a product shot. I just gave him back the watch today after 2 weeks. I didn't want to, but it's an expensive watch and it is his. So I had to give it back to him. So in the area where we moved, we're kind of exploring, getting to know the area, but right near my house there's a laundromat. And I drove by it and I just kind of thought that might make an interesting subject. So this picture I took about 5 in the morning. I love the color of the walls, the fluorescent lights give it sort of a timeless feel, and having different colors in the washers kind of moving around, I thought added to the image. So something a little different for me, but I was pretty happy with it. So late in the year in Manhattan, the sunrise aligns perfectly with the streets of Midtown. It's called Manhattanhenge. You have sunset in the summer, sunrise in the winter. You get that perfect alignment. So I drove in one morning, this is 42nd Street, just to try to get some shots with some long shadows possibly. But I like this one because I love the way the ambient light from the sky was kind of mimicking the light from the subterranean life of New York City down below. I just like the balance of the image, so this one made the list. My dad lives up in Connecticut, so I go to see him probably once a week, and I almost always bring my camera with me and stop along the way and take some shots. This is a fishing pier in Milford, Connecticut that I've shot before, many times before. And every time I go there, it's a little different. It depends on the time of year, the clouds, the water, the tide. But I just like there was kind of an offshore fog, and I love the softness of this image that really made those colors very muted and very pretty. So this was one of my better shots of this pier. I do shoot quite a bit in the Hudson Valley. There's a lot of interesting both landscape images and other things to shoot as well. So I was actually going up to shoot an old ice cream shop from the 1930s. But as I was driving up, I passed this hotel, which I've shot before. In fact, here's an image I took a while ago of the same hotel, but this one at night with kind of a wet pavement, that car in the lower left of the frame that was fogged over, I think it added to the mystery of it. This was one of my favorite images of that day, much better than the ice cream shop that I ended up shooting. On the same day, I was driving up further on Route 9 in, I guess it was Rockland County, and I passed this hotel. As it was going up there, it was still dark. I saw the glow from the office light, and so I pulled over, went into the parking lot, and took this shot with my tripod, which I really like. On the way home, the sun had risen already, and the sun was kind of hitting this hotel, and I took this picture of room 34. So same hotel, different times of the morning, different looking, but I think they evoke kind of a similar mood. That same weekend, my wife and I had taken a drive over to Nyack, New York. And we went into this bookstore, which was just chaos. I mean, there were books everywhere. I actually asked the owner, do you know where all the books are? I was hoping he would say, of course I do. But he said, absolutely not. So it's a total mess, but I thought I made a very interesting photography subject. So I got my camera out and took some shots with my wide-angle lens. The title of this image is called Shared Space, which is one of the titles of the books, but I thought it was very appropriate for the image. Last one. During our trip to Palm Springs, I woke up early one morning and drove to the outskirts of Palm Springs and got this shot, which I really like. I love the layers of the road in the foreground. I find there's something optimistic about this image, kind of the road going off into the sunrise. I'm hoping it's optimistic. We all need some optimism at this point, but this was one of my favorites of that trip. So that rounds out the top 20. I'm hoping next year is better year for everyone. I'm hoping photographically that I continue to grow and create and build my skills and my business. If you like these videos, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Any comments on these images, your favorite one possibly, put them down below. I'd love to get your viewpoints. And until next time.